Hello guys, my name is NaToSaphiX and I'll today be your host in this video made in collaboration with Play.gg. Today we'll be taking a look at Lucky versus Farlig, the two different AWP players for Astralis. I've picked out some of the best demos, or at least the best rated performances from these two guys, and we'll be taking a look at some of the clips and explaining in depth what the differences are, what the weaknesses are, and where the strengths lie. In this pistol round, Lucky is the utility man, throwing in the utility on A side and is sort of out of the action. All of the action is going on right now on the A bomb site, and meanwhile they are actually dropping down vent with the bomb. Lucky is holding for lurks and trying to catch rotations, but it's a very decentralized role. After having watched a couple of Lucky demos, it kind of confirms some of the suspicions that I've had about his performances. Much of Lucky's time is spent out of the action in a very decentralized role where he is either just throwing utility for other people or holding down an angle for what seems to be an eternity. It's clear to me that someone like Lucky thrives in a system. He is a system player, and it seemed to be the right pickup for Astralis, seeing as Astralis have had probably the best system of any team ever. Take this round as an example of just that. In this round he has so far just been holding down angles, throwing pieces of utility, and now he's ending up in again a very decentralized spot on the outskirts of the map and just holding, while his teammates are working the map, getting the entries, getting the trades, and he is sort of just left a little bit out of the round. I would definitely also characterize someone like Device, who Lucky came in to replace as a system player. The difference between the two is that Device is much better at finding impact in the mid round, something that Lucky in the demos I've watched has failed to do. Since this is mainly a T-side thing, and Astralis did have a lot of complications during Lucky's time there, it could sort of be explained a little bit by that. From watching these demos, it feels like Lucky is nothing more than just a pawn in a chess game. Here he is, ready with the nade, waiting for the T's to come in, probably just like he has been told. But where is sort of the mid-round decision making? It seems that he's either incapable or perhaps unable in the current system of making important and impactful mid-round decisions. Time and time again, I saw whenever Lucky got contact, he would take that contact and retreat into a much safer hiding place. This is a testament to his passive nature, which I think everyone could see during his time in Astralis. This explains away the low average damage per round in many of his matches. It explains away how a lot of the time it seemed like someone else had to step up to win these matches. This decision making seems to come from low confidence, and knowing Lucky's time in Astralis, I kind of do understand where he's coming from. Having been thrust into many different roles and just seeing a general lack of faith from the Astralis management, I understand why it's hard to have breakout performances. But there were also glimmers of hope. I've played Lucky personally many times, and I know that mechanically he's a very sound and skilled player. This mechanical ability was not what was holding him back. The thing with having a system player like Lucky, someone who is very passive in nature, is that their strengths lie in the mid to late round. And the only way that they can get to the mid to late round is if they have players around them that are very good and are creating the space to allow them to get into the positions where they are the most comfortable. And from the demos I watched, whenever Lucky did get into a position which was mid to late round, he typically played them very well. Like this one, where he's now buying time for his teammate, waiting, getting a guy close to ramp who now is gonna get killed by his teammate, and then peeking on the right timing to finish off the round. Lucky seems to be a guy who is very good when you get him into the right positions where he feels very comfortable. And I believe this is what helped him massively in Trick, where all of his teammates would at any time create the space and just die for him. The problem though when you join a top tier team like Astralis is that if you're sacrificing these other players who is more well rounded, more experienced, and probably on paper in general better, you're setting up the one guy who needs it the most but possibly will grant you the least. Lucky being out of the action and out of position on T side could be explained away a little bit by bad calling, or it could be explained away by a sort of playstyle wise thing. but what I did notice was that on the CT side of this match he was very often out of position as well, and that is a much more worrying trend, seeing as this is sort of his own decision making, putting him in bad positions. Lucky comes across sometimes as a little helpless, and it seems to be a type of guy who needs quite a bit of micromanagement. I can't imagine that being very fun when you are used to playing with a world-class, possibly best ever AWP player like Device. I know I've been focused mainly on sort of the negatives of Lucky, that is almost a given seeing as he is out of the team. But I want to let you guys know as well that I do think Lucky still has what it takes to potentially compete at the absolute top level of Counter-Strike eventually. It just seems he still has some learning, some growing to do. I do think though in the mid to late round he is a very capable player, and if you found a way to get him out of his shell, like in this round, you might be able to see a much more well-rounded player and someone who could potentially take over matches more often. That leads us to the, so to say, other guy, Farlig. I've picked out a few rounds from 2 different demos where I feel like it really showcases his mechanical skill, but also just his ability to play very dynamic, something that Lucky didn't quite have. I was honestly not quite sure what to think of Farlig before he joined Astralis, as I never really watched too many of his matches. I obviously have had the pleasure, let's call it, of playing against him a couple of times, but I've never seen him as being sort of a world-class AWP player. I have to say though, my opinion has drastically changed. Take this round as an example of how dynamic Farlig is as an AWP player. He's following Sip closely. As soon as he gets this kill, he goes and he immediately takes the next angle. So he's super quick at reading the game and knowing what space he can take, what angle needs to be covered next. He uses his utility very well here, uses a flash to bounce out and create a little bit of space so he can molo. Now he's waiting, instead of going out first as the AWP, he's waiting for Sip to come out. Now he's going out, taking an angle, getting a kill, getting that extra little bit of space. Now in the 3-on-3, they don't necessarily need that space, and so they fall back into more passive positions. He works his angles really well. He hears a flash being thrown, takes a more safe position, turns out to be a smoke. And then another flash, dodges it, gets another kill. Monsi misses his shot, pushes him, and wins the round. Even in Lucky's statistically best performances in Astralis, we never ever saw something like this out of him, where he is able to read the game in the split second and act on it. That is really what sets these two players apart. I will also be showing you some of Farlig's clutches later in this video so that we can compare, but basically the big positives of Lucky was his mid to late round clutching ability and his mechanical ability. But from watching these demos, I would argue that Farlig's mechanical ability is superior to Lucky's, and Farlig is just much more well-rounded. Another round here where he is just walking around, you see that he understands completely where the CTs can be. He's a very calm player, taking the angles one by one, again creating the space, trying to peek the AWP, using his utility to force out a play. And this round for Astralis is very quickly going to turn sour. We'll see how he deals with it as well. So now Jax gets a kill onto Glaive, and the bomb is lost with 35 seconds in the 3-on-5. A lot of people, I think even with the Astralis of Lucky, would have saved this scenario, but instead Farlig uses his utility to force Jax off the angle, gets the kill onto Jax. Meanwhile BlameF dies elsewhere on the map, unfortunately. And with this, they actually do have a real shot at winning this round. Sip is the next point of contact, and he wins a nice duel onto Nico. With the timer being so low, they can no longer win this round, because of the guy in the cubby. But look what Farlig does. He handles it very well after a missed shot, falling back, hits a very nice one onto LXCB, takes out his deagle and manages to save the AWP for the next round. From the eye test alone, Farlig just looks like the better player. And it could be that Farlig in this case is just the better player for this team. But statistically speaking, experience-wise, with the eye test, all factors point to Farlig being the better player currently. And I do think Farlig is an absolutely amazing pickup from Astralis, having watched through these demos of both players. To me, it's in general clear how much more Astralis as a unit trust Farlig than they did Lucky. Seeing as how Lucky always in pistol rounds was the utility man playing around with no armor, whereas Farlig on the other hand always has armor and typically does very well in pistol rounds. One key difference between the two is Farlig's difference sort of in clutching ability. Farlig wins them a lot of the time on just going for the opponent straight to his throat and just shooting their heads off. Whereas Lucky was a much more calculated Terminator, trying to outplay his opponents, seeing if he could get into the backlines, trying to kill someone in the side, playing around the smoke. Farlig just likes to take the duel and win it. With Farlig, they have a very dynamic AWP who is extremely calm both in his aim and his playstyle. You simply get the feeling that he is in control of the game the whole time. To me, one of the key things that I look for when I'm evaluating a player's ability is how he looks in the match. Some players have shaky aim and they play scared. They are sort of the ones that look the most nervous. There are some players, like Lucky for example, who have clean aim but look like they play scared. And then there are players like Farlig, who in my opinion are the real world class players, who have clean aim and they play with confidence. This round is another example of Farlig's great mid rounds. He's stuck here holding B by his lonesome, and his teammates are dying on A. First he takes an angle, tries to trade his teammate, only gets a leg shot, and now it's very difficult to see how he's gonna get back into this round. 2 on 3, connector gets smoked, and Farlig now needs to find some kind of avenue back into the bomb site. Very helpful of BlameF to open up with a grenade kill, but Farlig actually wraps around the entirety of the map, picks up a Galil instead of an AWP, and finds the first frag. Notice also how after this kill, Farlig is playing very safe, trying to nade positions away and buying time for BlameF to get the second contact. This is exactly how a 2 vs 2 turns into a 2 vs 1 should be played. Another great round for Farlig is this one where he is holding A Palace and Hampus is just about to get a flash. First of all, this shot is not an easy one to hit. But then also the reposition after this. Smokes off A house, knows that someone else flashed for him, knowing that there's most likely a second guy. So he repositions close to slope and takes a very aggressive angle. This, I believe, is something we would have never seen Lucky do. This re-aggression mid-round in a 5-on-4 is in this case very strong. He ends up basically locking down the whole A bomb site aggressively by himself, giving so much info to his team, and also just plain winning the round. I don't want you to leave this video thinking that Lucky is completely useless. Lucky, from watching the demos, is honestly a very good player, mechanically and also mid to late round. There are just the key differences in the system player versus the instinct, the aggressive versus passive, and sort of the differences in how much micromanagement each player needs. But these are things that Lucky can learn with age, and Lucky is quite a few years younger than Farlig. At the current moment in time, Farlig is definitely the better player, but don't count Lucky out just yet. I think that guy still has a bright future ahead of him. Lastly, let me leave you with this great pistol round by Farlig versus NIP. We don't need any speech over this. Thank you so much for watching the video.